Before we begin, I want to announce that the second book in the Megacosm, The Noriko Meme, is available for pre-order right now, so go check it out wherever books are sold. And now back to the video. Hello again, this is Victor James, author of the Megacosm, and I want to discuss the character Riddick. I was actually about to make a video about the 2013 Riddick as a guilty pleasure movie, but then I thought it actually shouldn't be a guilty pleasure movie because the entire Riddick franchise was once poised to be the next big thing. It was the year 2000. We had just celebrated the new year, and it was before 9/11, and everyone was riding this wave of optimism. We had just left the 90s where there was a slew of new action heroes like Wesley Snipes, Nick Cage, Will Smith, Jeff Wincott, Jeff Speakman, Gary Daniels, Chow Yun-fat, Jet Li, amongst others. But as the century turned, there was a hole for this beefy, burly, macho, tough guy in the vein of Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jean-Claude Van Damme, or Dolph Lundgren. Sure, all the guys were still making movies at that time, but many of those movies were modest hits, and time was beginning to catch up to them. They just were no longer able to pull off that muscle-bound, soldier of fortune, go it alone and get the girl kind of action hero like they were in the 80s. And most of the new action stars were closer to the John McClane than John Rambo. So who was going to fill that role? We thought we had the answer when a little-known film landed in 2000 called Pitch Black. And this was before the internet had fans speculating, months, even years, picking apart trailers to form an opinion of a movie before they saw it. Now, back then we saw a trailer or two and hoped for the best. Or at best, the word of mouth compelled us to go see what the fuss was all about. And that's how I heard of Pitch Black. I went to the theater with my uncle and I remember being quite blown away. Not that Pitch Black was a masterpiece, but I fell in love with this criminal who just stole every scene he was in. Played by this unknown actor at the time named Vin Diesel, Riddick was strong, charismatic, smart, cunning, stealthy, and most of all lethal. With his deep gravelly voice and eye-shine job that allowed him to see in the dark, Riddick had a swagger that was a mix of sort of street thug and criminal gangster genius with a sense of macho confidence. And he had a physique that made you think of the 80s action hero. Plus, Pitch Black was a movie that was actually fun to watch. It was a story about a spaceship that crashed on a strange and dangerous world. Riddick at the time was a prisoner of a man named Johns, who appeared to be his equal in toughness and a capable law enforcement officer that protected the survivors against this ruthless killer in their midst. But then the tables turned as the planet became deadly when it was thrust into a never-ending darkness, hence the title Pitch Black. Throughout the rest of the film, we watched as Riddick had the best character arc in the movie. We learned that Riddick had a terrible beginning, abandoned by his mother in a trash can with his umbilical cord wrapped around his neck. Because of his troubled and criminal past, Riddick began Pitch Black as a selfish, intimidating figure who played with the minds of the survivors as they struggled to survive. But as the film went along, he became sort of an anti-hero who kept the survivors alive to use them as labor for his own survival until he truly turned a corner. Now, spoiler alert for those who haven't seen it yet, but when Carolyn Fry, the pilot of the crashed ship, who had her own heroic redemption arc in Pitch Black, sacrificed her own life for his, Riddick was forever changed. At the beginning of the film, Fry was ready to sacrifice all the survivors to save herself, but was stopped by the other co-pilot before doing so. Yet by the end of the film, she was willing to risk her life for them all, including Riddick, who didn't really feel he was worth it. But when she died, even Riddick had to admit that the old, selfish, murderous criminal he was had died on that planet.
A lot of questions. What did we run into? Could even be a merc ship. So what the hell do we tell him about you?
Tell him Riddick's dead. He died somewhere on that planet.
And that was Pitch Black in a very small nutshell. If you haven't seen it by now, I highly recommend checking it out as soon as this video ends. Pitch Black was a short, concise, thrilling movie with a small set and premise that successfully mixed science fiction with creature horror. And this was the beginning of Riddick. And I remember walking out of the theater wanting to know more about this criminal turned hero, and I jumped on my dial-up to search the forums. This led me to a forum post that reposted the man himself, Vin Diesel, who personally thanked the fans for making Pitch Black a hit and to be on the lookout for his next action movie, XXX. Remember, this was before social media. We didn't have X or Instagram. We were using Netscape and searching Ask Jeeves and waiting 15 minutes for a site to load. At the time, it was unheard of to have this kind of access to as a celebrity. And just Vin's interaction with the fans brought him to the cusp of being the next action star. I couldn't find the original post, but here's the AI backing up my story. And Pitch Black's ending actually set it up to be a long-standing franchise. Riddick had escaped the planet with the only two people who saved, the Ayman Abdul Al-Walid and a kid named Jack who played a part in his turnaround as she idolized Riddick throughout the entire film. The trio was off the planet, heading out to deep space with the entire Universal storyline open to them. There is actually very little lore told in Pitch Black, and so much story to be told, and Vin Diesel along with the writer David Twohy used various mediums to tell it. Following the movie in 2000, there was a little known TV movie called The Chronicles of Riddick Into Pitch Black, which picked up months after the events of Pitch Black. It actually really wasn't a great film, but it did give more insight into the world Riddick lived in, with the mercenaries and privatized prison system. And then in 2004, Vin Diesel lent his voice to the Chronicles of Riddick, Escape from Butcher's Bay video game. Published by VinVidi, Escape from Butcher's Bay was a prequel to Pitch Black that told the story of Riddick and Johns and how he got his cool eyes and how he planned to escape from several prisons. It also introduced a bit of his lore that we'll talk about later. Escape from Butcher's Bay was a critically acclaimed video game hit, getting A's and low 90 scores, and selling enough to make it a platinum hit for Xbox. The excitement and commercial success from this video game set up the next movie in the Riddick universe to be a blockbuster. The skies really were the limit for Riddick as far as I was concerned, and there really wasn't a massive internet around to ruin my optimism beforehand. Now, I never like to write other people's stories. This is why I never make what-if videos or write fanfiction, so I've never given any real thought to what I as a writer would have taken Riddick after the events of Pitch Black. But I can tell you this, I wouldn't have taken the franchise in this direction as the Chronicles of Riddick. Set 5 years later, we see Riddick is on the run from bounty hunters and separated from survivors in the first film. And what followed was the complete opposite of what Pitch Black was. Where Pitch Black was tight and confined to a single planet, with basically just 3 sets, Chronicle was a wide open film that attempted to tell an epic space drama that fell flat. Vin Diesel and David Twohy are both on the record saying their goal was to open up the franchise to become a sci-fi epic. Chronicles of Riddick introduced a warrior race called the Necromongers, who were religious death fanatics that conquer worlds as they journey to a place they call the Underverse. The movie transformed Riddick from this troubled man who was born with a trash can and an umbilical cord wrapped around his neck to retconning that difficult beginning to make Riddick this last survivor of his planet called Furia. The movie followed Riddick over several planets, even running into Jack from the first film in prison, as it told the story of how Riddick was a living embodiment of his planet's fury as the leader of the Necromongers, the Lord Marshal, feared a prophecy that he would die from someone from that planet. To defeat the prophecy, the Necromongers destroyed Furia and killed all the newborn babies by strangling them with their umbilical cords. The Chronicles of Riddick introduced about a dozen new characters, elemental creatures, new planets that went from one scene to another that felt so disjointed as a struggle to keep a central storyline. Riddick was given powers by the ghosts of his people before he lost Jack near the end of the movie, killed the Lord Marshal, and took over the Necromongers. Now I'm paraphrasing the Chronicles of Riddick because there's just so much in this movie that it will take another video just to cover it all. I left the theater thoroughly disappointed as that seemed to be like an entirely different Riddick that I came to know or was expecting. Twohy later released a director's cut to help smooth the movie out a bit more, but even with the additional footage, the Chronicles of Riddick still wasn't the successor fans expected after Pitch Black, and this was proven in the negative box office and the critical fan reaction. Like The Last Jedi that would come over a decade later, the Chronicles of Riddick was a major misstep that truly derailed the Riddick franchise for what it could have been. Fan interest in the wider Riddick universe plummeted even after they animated The Chronicles of Riddick, Dark Fury, and another video game, The Chronicles of Riddick, Assault of Dark Athena, were released to further fill in the gaps of the lore. Fans just were not interested in Riddick anymore. And it would be almost 10 years later that we actually get a true sequel to The Chronicles of Riddick in the third film simply called Riddick. Riddick picked up where Chronicles left off, but went back to basics. After being betrayed by the Necromongers, Riddick finds himself stranded on a hostile planet that he had to survive. Does this sound familiar? The main complaints fans had was that this movie felt like it was a retread of Pitch Black. There even came a point in the movie that the deadliest creatures on the planet came out at night. But as similar as it was to Pitch Black, it did bring Riddick back to his roots. Once again, he was a one-man monster as he had to thwart not one, but 2 groups of mercs who came to the planet just to claim his bounty. The story even went full circle as leader of one of the merc groups was the father of Johns from the first film, who wanted to capture Riddick to avenge his son and find out what happened on the planet in the first movie. While Riddick's antics were a bit over the top, making him nearly unstoppable, I appreciate that there was an attempt to correct course. There was no Necromongers, no elementals, inferior prophecies, just Riddick on a planet trying to escape, which is what he does. The movie even had fan favorite Battlestar Galactica alum Katie Sackhoff as Dahl, who had the potential to be a replacement for Jack, who was unceremoniously killed off in the Chronicles of Riddick. But it might have been too little too late. While it was better received than Chronicles, after waiting a decade, Riddick failed to reignite that spark that began with Pitch Black. But Riddick made profit, and there was a plan for a 4th film. In 2014, Vin Diesel and Twohy announced Riddick Furia, which would tie up the dropped storylines from the Chronicles of Riddick. Supposedly filming began in 2024, but checking IMDb doesn't give me much hope as there has been no cast or crew announcement, and to be honest, time has started to catch up to Vin Diesel as well. After 26 years, Vin is now pushing 60 and looking like Stallone and Arnold did when he burst onto the scene back in 2000 with Pitch Black. If the story of Riddick is to continue, it will probably be in comics, anime, and video games, but the time for live action movies has unfortunately passed. And this is a shame. Vin Diesel appears to be a really nice guy who actually respects his fans and truly is a fan of Riddick. Instead of greed, he and Tui actually wanted to create the next big sci-fi universe that will have fans writing Wikipedias about for decades and has expanded the lore, except they pushed too hard. The events of Chronicles of Riddick should have been spread out between 2 or even 3 films. The events on Helion Prime, the first planet Riddick visited and met up with the Iman, could have filled the runtime of one movie alone. By choosing to rush and cram all this lore into one movie just broke the back of the franchise since it was a complete 180 from the film that put Riddick on the map. With patience and proper care, Riddick could have been mentioned with John McClane, Lone Wolf McQuaid, or even a Rambo, put in that pantheon of action heroes from before. By now we could have been a whole new universe with deep lore and been on the old man Riddick phase with a crop of new heroes and anti-heroes to root for. Instead, Riddick is nominally mentioned when discussing action heroes, leaving many of us fans to wonder what could have been. And I want to remind you about my website, themegacosm.com. Here you can buy my first book in the Megacosm called Fiasco Adventures. And it's also the second book in a novelette called The Mark that's available for digital for 99 cents. And also a reminder that my book, The Noriko Me, the third book in the Megacosm, is arriving May 8th. I'm really excited about people to read this. I'm actually so excited that I actually have the first chapter of The Noriko Me available for free on the website. So you can go ahead and read the first chapter of The Noriko Me to see if you actually want to buy the book before it comes out on May 8th. And another announcement I want to say is that I'm actually selling merch now. So on my megacosm.com store, you can actually buy the Fiasco Adventure logo shirt and a baby onesie with the Fiasco logo on it. And you can also buy my imprint logo t-shirt. And I got them as cheap as I could, which is $20.44. Don't know where the 44 cents came from, but that's as cheap as I can get it. And I hope you enjoyed it. I bought a couple myself and they feel great. So go to themegacosm.com, you can sign up, and I will have discounts for people who sign up. But you can also buy my books there, and it's also a one-stop shop, and you can read my short stories like the Noriko Me for free. But that's all I gotta say about this. God bless you and keep you. That's it, I'm done.